the project. As we came out of Module 11, that was monitoring, and I look at monitoring and controlling as being two sides of the same coin. We monitor to know how we're doing, and then as project manager, we control, we make adjustments to the plan in order to make sure we're on track. So these two actually are tightly coordinated. But we're going to look at, we're going to add in an additional measurement approach as we look at control. So a little extra element we'll throw in here. I call this both hands on the wheel. And if you think about you're driving down the road in your car and you drift off onto the shoulder a little bit and you feel that vibration, and one option is to whip the wheel back and throw yourself back onto the road, but then the chance that you can slide all the way across and go out of control the other direction. And for project management, monitoring is knowing where you are, and if you drift off and you run a little behind schedule or a little over budget, or your scope starts to slip, is to make small adjustments to the project to bring it back into line. And that's what controlling is about. It's about nudging the project into the right direction and keeping it going straight down the road. So it's knowing what's going on, it's knowing what's going right, knowing what's going wrong, and we're going to look at a measure this time, the critical ratio, where we may find activities that are doing incredibly well, and in that case we'd like to know why they're doing so well, and we might be able to replicate that in other parts of the project. We make adjustments to the plan to make sure we get it going on. And put in your head that as project manager, there's kind of two things going on. I'm going to start over on this side with stewardship, and that is that I've been given resources from our organization, people, facilities, offices, equipment, capital, many things. They've been put into my hands, and I'm the steward of those, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the right return for that investment that they've put in my hands. And at the same time, I've got a project that I'm executing, and I want to regulate that to make sure that I'm pouring the right resources in and providing the proper training and coaching and doing the right things to move my project team towards completion of this. And that's what control is balancing those two items, my responsibility to the organization, my responsibility to completing the project, and keeping that all in check. So, critical ratio, we're going to take, this is not the same as earned value, but it's very close in many ways. You'll see some similarities here. But critical ratio, we're actually going to look at an individual activity and calculate that ratio. If you remember with the earned value calculations, they were all done at the aggregate level. And what happens when you aggregate is some good and some bad will blend together to give you an overall picture of the project. With critical ratio, we're going to measure that ratio in each activity and be able to identify the activities that are performing very well and the activities that are performing poorly, and be able to make adjustments in each case. So the critical ratio is a good measure of the general health of the project, but it also allows us some detail to see how things are going, and combining both. If you remember earned value, we had the schedule variance, and we also had the budget variance. With critical ratio, we actually blend those two together to overall assess an activity and say, well, maybe you're spending a little bit more money, but you're doing much better on the schedule, so we're going to let those two balance each other out. So it's combine the two. But no matter what happens, we come up with a critical ratio, and anytime you get an answer that is less than 1, that's bad. And anytime you get a value greater than 1, that's good. That means you're outperforming the expectation. So if you're outperforming it, possibly we would like to find out what you're doing and do it with others, or we'd like to find out, did we just budget too much money to you, and we should still adjust the future allocations of budget to other areas if that's not going to be necessary. So if we've made some errors in our planning, this will also bring that to light and we can make adjustments. There's the actual formula for the critical ratio, and these some of these items should look very similar. Actual progress, scheduled progress. So if we should have been 80% complete by now and we're only 60%, that's where these are going to come in. So 0.60, and we're supposed to be 0.80. Budgeted costs, so these are percentages complete. Budgeted cost, let's say our budget was $10,000 up to this point in time, and our actual cost is $8,000. So we're going to look at dollars on this side, and we can look at percent complete over on this side. I'm going to blend those two together by multiplying them, and I'm just giving you this example. You can look at this as being percentages here. There's our actual progress and our scheduled progress. We could say that was 20% and you should have been 30%. You can use whatever measures you would like to assess that. Budget and actual costs would normally use dollars on that. And then here's the result from that. 1.0 means that one's right on target. 0.67, that's not good. They're both below 1. These are good. But in this case, I may want to even evaluate these two activities, 4 and 5, and find out why they're doing so well. Was it a budgeting mistake, or are they being way more efficient than we anticipated? In this case, they're underperforming, and again, we may want to do some analysis. Now, I'm going to take one more step on these. We've got our critical ratio values, but let's look at this from a control chart standpoint. You may be familiar with this from operations management or another course. And what a control chart does, if you don't remember, is it provides various values of output. You can see 1.0 was our target, 1.5 we saw just a moment ago, and we have some lower values. So this is really our target here in the middle. And what a control chart does is it keeps track of performance across time. So if we measure it at the end of week 4, there's maybe an activity. There's activity A, there's activity C, and let's say this is activity D. And then we get out here to week 10 and we measure it again, and sure enough, A is right on track like they were, and C is now up here, and D has moved in here. This shows us our trends over time. And as a project manager, those trends allow me to see that, hold it, C is heading in the wrong direction. D is heading in the right direction. It also gives us another piece of information, and that is, let's see if I can get back to these. Let's put it here, is we can set up these cut points right up front in the beginning and say, you know, when we track this activity, if the activity is anywhere in here, it's fine, it's safe. Don't mess with it, don't ask any questions, focus on other stuff. If it's in this area, we ought to check it out. Same here. If it's in this area, immediate action is necessary. And if it's performing this poorly, call the boss. So we can set up these cut points based on the critical values so that when those critical values are calculated and are presented to the project manager, we know immediately what actions to take based on those critical values. So that's incorporating the critical values with a control chart to help us determine what level of response to make. So keep an eye out for that. The key element from this chapter is obviously control, decision-making, response to our monitoring, but we also have the opportunity to look at CR, this critical ratio, as another way of monitoring project performance.